Okay, so Tinkercad is a very beginner-friendly software to help students understand how to create 3D models. Is it what the professionals are using? No, not necessarily, but it is an awesome introductory tool. So on my assignment, I'll probably have linked somewhere a link that will take you to tinkercad.com. You're always welcome just to go to tinkercad.com. It will ask you if you are a student. It may ask you to sign in. If you need to sign in, just go ahead and sign in with Google using your student email. If it asks you for a class code, then my code will be written either on the assignment or it will be written on my whiteboard. So once you get to this page, it's going to look something like this. It may give you a funny nickname. That's okay. No, it doesn't like reflect on your design or anything like that. To make your first design, if you're on the home page, you're going to see a create button right here, or you can navigate to the designs tab on the left-hand side and you can go to create. If you've never created anything before, you're not going to have anything in this area below, but it does automatically save any assignment that you work on, which is incredibly nice. So to create an assignment, you just click on this create button and we'll create a 3D design. It also does circuits and code blocks, but we can get into that another day. So this is your work plane. This is the area that you will be creating your 3D model. Let's quickly go over the camera controls here just to get a feel for it. If you do have a mouse, if you hold down the right click button using the mouse and move your mouse around, you can then rotate the camera. If you are using a touchpad, that would be 2 fingers on the touchpad and then moving it around to rotate the camera. You can also use this cube up here at the top left. If you left click and hold that, you can rotate the camera that way, or you can click anywhere on this cube and the camera will automatically orient itself into that perspective. So sometimes if you want like a top-down perspective, it's really nice to utilize this cube over here. If you want to zoom in and out, if you're using a mouse, you're going to use the scroll wheel to zoom out and zoom in. It's going to zoom in wherever your cursor is facing. So if my cursor is like way over here, it's going to start zooming in that direction. So keep that in mind. If you're just using your touchpad, that would be 2 fingers on the touchpad and without pressing down, and then you're going to move it up or down to zoom in and zoom out. If you are using a mouse to pan, you will be pushing down on the scroll wheel and using your mouse, moving it around to pan the camera. If you're using a touchpad, you are pushing down with 3 fingers on the touchpad, and that will also pan the camera. The first thing I would recommend doing is actually going down to this bottom right settings right here. By default, your settings, your unit of measurement will be in millimeters right here. I actually recommend changing the units to inches and then making that the default so then you don't need to worry about changing that again. If you want to work in millimeters, go for it. On the right-hand side, these are the basic shapes that we can bring into our object. So let's just bring into a box here, or a cube. I just left-click once, move it over, left-click again to place it. You can also click, hold, and drag it over to bring in an item. We can manipulate this box now. There's lots of different ways that we can manipulate it. If I want to translate it on the X and the Z plane, I can left-click and hold, and then slide it around to translate it around there. If I want to translate it on the Y plane or the Y axis, I click on this little arrow up here and then I can drag it up and down. And then how you rotate is you use these curvy arrows right here. So you can rotate it in 22.5 degree increments if you are on this inside ring. If you go into the outer ring, you can rotate it by 1 degree increments. And so you can rotate it from any direction. You just might have to rotate the camera a little bit so you can see these curvy arrows, but you can orient it that way as well. So that's how we translate our shapes. We can also change the actual size of our shapes as well. So using any of these squares, we can change the size, we can shrink it down, play around with the squares, see what each one does. The corners are usually more both on the X and the Z, and then the top one right here is to like squash or stretch it there. In addition to this, you're also going to get these parameters on this little window here as you have the shape selected. So if I wanted to round off this box a little bit, I can just slide this radius scale. Maybe I want to change the length without using these squares. I can actually like click and drag here to change those sizes as well. If you want to change the color, this isn't going to affect the color that it is when it gets 3D printed, but if you wanted to, just for fun, you can click on that and you can change the color here. You can even get really fancy and use like a custom wheel to change the colors that way as well. So those are the ways that we can like transform and manipulate our shapes. Let's kind of add to these basic shapes and let's just create like a house. So if I move over here with the roof tool, you'll notice that I can like place it on the ground, but when I move it up to one of these faces, it's automatically going to orient itself on top of that face, which is really nice if you're trying to like stack a bunch of different items together. It's going to be easier to build our house if I automatically just place the roof on the very top face rather than placing it right here and then trying to, you know, kind of like line it up. So you can see definitely why it's a lot more beneficial to just place it where you want it to be automatically. Then we can like scale this around, and you'll notice not all shapes have these parameters that you can slide and change the sizes and round off the corners. It's only like a select shape that has like those certain parameters. So we have these two things together. I noticed that it's not very oriented. It's not like exactly in the middle of this box. And so what we can do is we can actually select both of these shapes. So I'm left clicking away from here and dragging a box over these. And I can use the align tool, and then I can make sure it's like exactly in the middle. I don't want it in the middle of this shape. If I wanted that, I'd click on this and we'd like center them, but we'll just keep it right there. So now you'll notice that it's like exactly perfectly center using the align button. Now you'll notice up here at the top, we have these different categories. There's a bunch of like pre-made stuff, creatures, critters, things like that, pre-made hardware, stuff like that. If you are submitting something for an assignment or to be 3D printed, I only allowed the basic shapes category. All of these other pre-made things you can make yourself using the basic shapes. So that's a little rule of thumb. Now, there still are a lot of cool things in the basic shapes category. One is the scribble tool. So if you, let's orient the scribble tool somewhere on this face, you can draw like exactly what kind of thing that you want. So we'll just do a little smiley face. And then with your sketch, you can also go ahead and like resize these, change it up, things like that. There's also like a text tool, so you can line that up. You can type in a text, and just like any other shape, you can like change the color of it and everything like that. Okay, so let's go into holes now. Now holes, if you look at the top, we have these two pre-made holes. We have the box and the cylinder. What a hole is anything that overlaps with this when we group it up together is going to get cut out. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's make this like a super big cylinder. Let's have it like cover a big section of our house. And do you see where it's darker around the house? That's because that's the area that's going to get cut out once I group these together. So to group them, it's kind of going to be like when we align. I'm going to left click away from here, drag every shape that I want to group up. So if I wanted to be very selective about the shapes that I group up, if I hold shift and left click, you can target exactly which shapes you want to select, and just don't select whatever shapes you don't want to have grouped up. But in this case, I'm fine grouping up everything. So I'm just gonna left click, do all that. And then up here at the top, there is a group button. So if I press that group button, it may take a while depending on how complicated your shape is, but the hole cuts that shape out. So that's how holes work. Now you may notice that all of your different colors have gone away. If that bothers you, what you can do is you can click on this color button here, and if you click on the multicolor, they will revert back to their color. But since these are grouped up together, they're not separate. I can't move them separately anymore. As far as Tinkercad is concerned, these are all one shape, so they're all going to move all by themselves. So if you want to ungroup them, you can click this ungroup button to do that. A little heads up, if you're not sure with the hotkeys, Control Z is to undo, or you can click on this little arrow right here to undo a step as well. So if you accidentally made a mistake, you can always undo that. Now, anything can be a hole. It's not just this box and this cylinder. I could click on my text here, and instead of using a solid color, I can make it into a hole. If I was to group this how it is right now, nothing would happen because there's no overlapping. So I actually have to click on this and drag it into the box. And now when I group these together, then that hole will get grouped up. Okay. One problem that I notice a lot of students have is they have no frame or reference on how big a model is. So if we were to 3D print this out, yeah, if I'm zoomed in, this thing looks like it'll be a super big print. But if I zoom out, it's going to be teeny tiny. So how do we know how big a object is? We are going to use something called the ruler tool. It looks like an L. It's right up here, or you can use the hotkey R. It's going to have you place it somewhere on your work plane. It doesn't matter really where it is. You could place the ruler tool like way over here, as long as it's set down. And you'll notice when I have the ruler tool, it now tells me the dimensions. If you're in inches, these are in inches, millimeters, they'll be in millimeters, and it's the blue arrow. So the green arrow is its position on the work plane, so you can kind of ignore that for now. But as far as the blue arrows, you can notice that this is 1.66 inches tall, 2.245 inches long, 2.057 inches deep. Let's say if I wanted this to be like a very specific size, I can just click on this number here, and let's say I want this to be 2 inches tall. I can just type in 2 and press enter, and it will automatically scale it up. Now I only had the box selected, so you can see that that's the only thing that changed. If I wanted everything to scale up to that level, I would just select everything. You can group it, you don't have to, just as long as you have all the shapes selected and say, oh, I want this to be 3 inches, and it will scale that dimension up to the proper size that you want it to be. So that's just like a basic introduction to Tinkercad. If you are happy with your product, first of all, make sure that everything's grouped up so our holes are cut and everything like that. And then to submit these for either assignments or for getting it actually 3D printed, you're going to click on this export button up here. So click on export. As far as the slicing software is concerned, it likes STL files the best, so I prefer that you export this as an STL file. It will download that file to your downloads, and then that's the file that you submit either for assignments or for files to get printed.